All right, I think we are live. Hello, and thank you all for joining me today. I'm Roli Saxena, CEO of NextRoll. It's the parent company for both RollWorks and AdRoll. And I'm honored to be moderating this panel today. We are talking about the revenue revolution, women reshaping the B2B revenue landscape. So prior to joining NextRoll, I've spent over 16 years in a variety of go-to-market roles, including leading North America sales and global customer success at LinkedIn. And most recently, I was a chief customer officer at Brex. I'm also a mother of two young, incredibly talented kids, a daughter, and a mentor to many. So before we kick off our session here, I just want to remind everyone with a few housekeeping items. One, feel free to use our chat feature or the Q&A box for any questions you have. We will try to answer as many of those towards the end of the session. And two, I will encourage all of you to stay till the end of the session because we have a surprise for you all. We will randomly pick about 20 winners who will be there at the end of the session, and we'll notify them through email and LinkedIn, who will receive our incredible Women in Revenue t-shirts. Those are really, really cool t-shirts and ones that you should all try to get a hold of. So now, as we gather today, I want to take a moment to recognize the significance of the Women's Equality Day, which will be celebrated on Saturday, August 26th. This is a day that commemorates the hard-fought journey towards gender equality and the historic 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution, granting women the right to vote. This day serves the reminder of strides that we've all made, the progress that still awaits ahead of us, and the importance of celebrating women's accomplishment. So today's webinar is going to be an insightful discussion. It's going to also be a celebration of all women who've shaped the landscape of revenue leadership with technology companies. And we have incredible panelists here who will share with you some stories, their challenges, their triumphs, offering valuable insights and fostering a world that includes more female leaders in revenue roles. I can share with you when I first started in a revenue role now about 10 years ago, there were many, many rooms. I was the only women in senior leadership. And it's so incredible to see now so many young and aspiring and senior leaders in revenue roles. And many of them are here on this panel. So let's get started with introducing many of our panelists here, starting with Laura Horton. She's a Senior Director of Product Marketing at G2. Alyssa Thornley, Sales Director at SmartBug Media. Srishti Chugh, Director of Customer Success at Opensense. Ashley Brown, Associate Director of Customer Success at Instapage. Lizzie Chapman, VP of Partnerships and Channels at both RollWorks and AdRoll. Heather Williams, Director of Customer Success and Onboarding at Sendoso. So thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to learning from your leadership and your individual journey into revenue leadership roles. So I'm going to actually start with Srishti and ask her a quick question about your journey from the conversations we've had in the past. You've had some incredible diverse career paths you've taken and experiences you've had. So curious for you to share with our audience on what that journey was all about.
Yeah, happy to do that. Nice to meet everyone. As Roli said, I lead our CS team at Opensense, and my career actually did not start in technology at all. I actually started in the financial services. I came from a family of people in business and finance, and so sort of just followed in the footsteps. And I worked at some large companies, a couple of big fours, with my internships and long-term consulting and financial advisory services. But that was just not sort of where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in technology, and I pivoted my career to come to Opensense. I particularly chose customer success because I think there's a lot of transferable skill sets that you can get from working with clients and then working with customers. I think that really built like a strong foundation in customer success. It was a big pivot from going from really large companies with tens of thousands of employees to a small startup, which I think we have grown over the last few years, and it's been a tremendous journey. So I'm very excited about this webinar today. Looking forward to talking to everybody. It's definitely a topic that sort of hits home. So excited about it.
Shrishti, my journey is very, very similar. I started actually as a chemical engineer, and went from there to actually being in tech, but in product, and then found my journey over to revenue leadership roles. It's fascinating how transferable the skills are, even though it doesn't look on the surface of it. I know, Ashley, you had shared some of your experiences as well in terms of your career journey. I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
Certainly. So yeah, starting in tech right out of college as an inside sales rep, and later transitioning to project management, I didn't know that my career path would take me towards customer success and leadership at that time, but I now really recognize how my project management experience early on enhanced my ability to not only strategically plan, but allocate resources, successfully execute, what's needed for customer success with a product. So though, again, I didn't really exactly know I wanted to be a customer success leader at the time, it was certainly formative. Then in my initial sort of project management role, I oversaw successful product rollouts for existing clients and just crafted onboarding strategies for new customers, which are skills that I apply in my current role as well. So, but I think that the most distinctive sort of move I made or pivot, the unique path I took was that I did take a pause on my work in tech to lean into my venture of building a voiceover production career by way of my own small business, where I led as a sole proprietor for 7 years. And that really, obviously cultivated creativity, but more notably, I guess, diverse collaboration, and really sort of bolstered my advocacy skills. Financial acumen, and work ethic. Most importantly, I think, when you build something, its success is all on you. It's in your hands. So I think that's probably the most unique pivot I made in my career journey. But then I came back to tech, where I am now, and I pursued a CSM role at Instapage with aspirations of leadership there. And I immediately sort of found myself guided and supported by my leaders, who I view as mentors as well. And I progressed towards revenue leadership there. So the work I've done at Instapage has just, no doubt solidified my commitment to being a revenue leader. So I'm really excited to be on this path.
That's wonderful. There are common themes that are already starting to emerge, and I'm sure there'll be more. One, every experience you have, it doesn't matter which industry you are in or what role you are, it all adds up in building skills to really to have empathy with your customers. And then the second thing is the second theme that's coming up is it's business acumen. So as you really think about revenue leadership roles, having early exposure and often exposure of what is important for the company, what is important for the business, what's important to your customers, all sort of really ties in to building a successful career. So two themes that are already starting to emerge. Another interesting topic that comes up often when you have women in leadership conversation, which is really around glass ceiling. There is everybody talks about there is a glass ceiling. How many of us here, raise your hands, have actually felt there was a glass ceiling and had to navigate through it? Laura, Ashley, we'll come back to you. It feels like we've got some stories to pick up on you and that, but I would love to really turn it over to Lizzie. I know, Lizzie, you raised your hand first. Share a little bit about how you experienced glass ceiling and how did you navigate through it in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty sure I have been passed up on promotions to men throughout my career, and I could tell stories about that, but I think there's a little bit of a lack of transparency there because it's rarely admitted that that was the case. So because I knew this question was coming up, I thought about a story that was very transparent in terms of a glass ceiling, and I think is like a really good metaphor of how to overcome that barrier. So at a previous company I worked for, I led partnerships, and I had prepared an offsite for the partners that I managed. So it was mostly my peers and some of their managers in attendance. And the president of my company decided to plan a golf day while we were out there and only asked a few people to join, who all happened to be men. Now, this was frustrating because, golf is a great way to build relationships with people, and those are the people I'm trying to build relationships with. It felt really misogynistic and reflected bad on the company and me, who was running this offsite. And I play golf, and they were playing at Pebble Beach, and that's an unbelievable golf course that I would have loved to play at. So I was pretty annoyed. I chatted with the president about it and was simply told, like, it's already booked, there's no more room. And I just let it play out. I kind of tried to get over it. But then I got my vindication. Later that week, we went on this outing where there was a bunch of different games that we were playing. And one of those games was to break a pane of glass by hitting a golf ball through it. It was literally breaking glass. And that same president had been trying to play this game far beyond his turn and couldn't break the glass. And I walked up and I took my first swing and I shattered the glass. It was loud. Everyone heard it. They all get excited about it. And the president could not break the glass no matter how hard that he was trying. And I think this just really relates to how I overcome these challenges in everyday work. I clock when I've been passed up or passed over for an opportunity or not included because I'm a woman. And I personally don't, yell and shout about it. I kind of just pay attention to it, recognize it, advocate appropriately, ask for feedback about why it turned out the way that it was. And, you usually get kind of a BS answer around it. And then I just keep doing my best work. I give people time to understand what I can contribute. I show them that I can deliver against the goals and drive revenue. And I gain buy-in to what I'm doing and what I'm leading across the organization. I slow burn it. So it's almost next to impossible not to give me an opportunity the next time something comes up. And I think it stinks to have to slow burn or take the slow burn approach, and it needs to change, and we need to keep pushing for that change. But whenever I get an opportunity to step up, I'm ready for it and I can deliver against it, because in that patient period, I learn a lot and I build a great internal network to go and crush that opportunity. So yeah, I just think that the last thing I want to say is, like, sometimes you might find yourself in a place where the glass is just too thick. And that was actually my experience with that organization that I did that offsite with. Ultimately my conclusion was that I needed to leave, and I decided to find a role elsewhere. I was really looking to get into a VP role, and I got an offer from another company. And as soon as I gave my notice, my current company offered me a VP position to stay. So when you know you deserve something and you're talented, you have to remember that you have power in that. And sometimes the best thing to do is find an organization that respects that talent. So yeah, that's kind of my story about glass ceilings, as literally as it can be.
I know oftentimes the glass ceiling is there and people, in your case, maybe your president didn't even realize what I'm assuming, was doing by taking a few folks over to golf. And Lizzie, I hope the company you joined was us from there. And
there was one more in between, but NextRoll is just as good.
That's great. No, I'm going to put in a NextRoll plug-in here. We are so proud to have more than 50% of our executive team made up of women. And we have nearly 50% of all our VPs and above women. So we are very proud of that, and it's an effort that we've gotten here not just by women leading it, but it's also sort of a lot of men and allies who've been really working on that. So with that NextRoll plug, let's continue the conversation here. Laura, I'd love to hear a little bit from you. So in a male-dominated industry, can you share a little bit about how women can assert their voices and have their ideas be heard? Lizzie shared some of her experiences, but would love to hear from you a bit on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think similar to some of our other panelists here, I've been in tech for a lot of my career, also spent some time in financial services, both which I think are traditionally sometimes seen as male-dominated industries. I think one of the most important things, and actually we just talked a little bit about this, is the organization that you choose. So remembering that when you're joining an organization, you're bringing a lot to the table, you're bringing unique talents and skills, and you should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I've definitely been able to have conversations in interview processes that help me parse out maybe what kind of leader I'll be working for, what kind of people I'll be working with. And in fact, in the sometimes rare but advantageous times that you're maybe flexible in looking for your next role and really have the opportunity to be choosy, I've even given feedback to recruiters in some cases and said, you know, I checked out your leadership and I don't see very much diversity there. And that concerns me. I don't think it's the right fit for me. So, you know, you have to be obviously lucky to be in the position that you can kind of share that level of feedback. But I think also we can kind of contribute to that, letting people know that it's important as women who are looking for different roles and next steps in our career. Beyond that, I think it's remembering that you do have a voice and a unique point of view and not being afraid to share it. I think one thing people have told me about working with me, I can actually be a little bit introverted sometimes, both in my personal life and in the workplace. And as people have gotten to know me, they've said, you know, you don't always talk the most in meetings, but when you say something, I know I need to listen. And that to me was such a fantastic compliment. I don't think I could have asked for better, because what they're saying is that you're adding value when you speak. And to me, that's better than speaking all the time and maybe being the loudest, is adding value to the group and really making an impact with the ideas that you're contributing. And, you know, when you do that, it becomes hard to ignore and you earn the respect of those that you're working with.
That's so good. Few words, but impactful words make all the difference. All right. So, Alyssa, I'm curious to hear from you in terms of how you've seen women effectively challenge the norms and promote progress of themselves and the other women in the organization.
Yes, thank you. First, I wanted to say and just underscore how important it is for us as revenue leaders to be thinking and talking and putting into place strategies to challenge norms and present progress. McKinsey & Company has shown, there's data all over the place, but my favorite one is that McKinsey & Company has shown that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity in executive teams are 25% more likely to have above average profitability. And in that sense, I see it not just as something that we're tasked with personally, whether or not we want to be just from the status quo of things, but something that's part of our role as stewards of long-term revenue success in an organization. And my ideas around this very much underscore what the women here have already modeled in their stories. You first need to understand that you are a symbol, not just for the women and peers in your organization, but for men that are learning how to challenge norms and present progress as well. And in that, it is incumbent to model the balance of authenticity, excellence, and leadership so that people see what that looks like and can take it on and make it their own for themselves and in their own organizations and their own teams. Second, advocate for strong programs that promote diversity of thought. That includes all the standards of diverse hiring practices, to a couple of the points of the stories that we've heard here today, clear criteria for career advancement and promotion, transparency and clarity and evaluation so people know why they're receiving the comments or non-promotions or why someone else was receiving it, clarity of pay, programs that promote workplace flexibility, paternal and maternal healthcare policies, fostering positive work-life balance. All of these things need to be on the thought of executive team members when pushing to challenge norms of what we're faced with today. And finally, I'd say being a thing I think about from time to time is the fact that being a leader and being a leader is partly learning how to communicate effectively. And if you're not necessarily able to challenge, or you don't feel confident yet in challenging thought and influencing mindsets, it's going to be challenging to lead teams that are challenging norms and presenting progress in the area of workplace diversity. So taking up some learning on how to challenge biases and stereotypes and bring people along and educate them on how to exist in this new way that we're leading is really critical to bringing up organizations with us.
There's so many things that you said that sort of, again, the themes that are starting to connect. One of the things you said is just clarity of what to expect from leaders. I mean, and Lizzie said some of the glass ceiling is just not having that transparency. What do you need to do to really get to that next level? So as executive leadership team, whether it's revenue roles or any role, it's so important to just have clarity of what is needed, and those guardrails and guidelines are consistent for everyone, right? And then making sure that we are actually providing systems where people feel like they can be successful, so that nobody is actually going out for a golf tournament to Pebble Beach without inviting the whole team together, if that's a choice, or finding another event. I'm actually going to move the discussion a little bit forward here. One of the things that I've seen in my career is the shift in, the women advancement is really delivered and driven by a lot of male allies who are working with us. I personally, my career has been massively influenced by a gentleman named Mike Gamson and many other men who've been my advocates and sponsors throughout my career. So there are a lot of men who've actually been part of my growth and journey, along with a lot of women. And so male advocates are really, really important and allies. Heather, I know we've heard stories from you in our pre-discussion where you shared that there are some strategies male allies can actually be part of your journey. Can you share a bit more on some of those strategies, and how do you really actively engage them in supporting women growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely have thought about this a lot, because sometimes I think it's one of those things where I'd actually say the strategies apply to both male and female allies. So it's not necessarily something that's specific to men. But I'll start with a story in which I experienced the opposite and talk about some ways in where we kind of where I've experienced a lot of support from some of my male allies. So at a previous role I had, I was reporting directly to the chief operations officer. And in one of my very first meetings with him, he told me that all of the Heathers that he knew were very talkative, and I didn't seem very talkative, and that I didn't smile a lot. And so I thought this was a really interesting discussion to be having, my very first conversation. I didn't quite know how to respond, but one thing that came back to me was one of my favorite quotes, which is, "Speak softly and carry a big stick" by Theodore Roosevelt. And I kind of, that became my mantra from that point on, is, to some of the other points that have been made here, not being the loudest person in the room doesn't mean that what you're saying isn't the most impactful. And some of the ways in which others supported me kind of through that time were specifically not being surprised when I consistently delivered really above and beyond, my job role, because I think sometimes we can be put into a box where assumptions are made about us as women, or, what Heathers should be like. And I think it was really important for me to have others around me building me up in a way that was just, oh yeah, of course you exceeded these expectations. That isn't a surprise. Like we expect that from you. And I thought that really did a lot for me personally. And then other than that, creating space for women to have a voice and feel comfortable in doing that. Something others have done for me, in particularly kind of a group setting that I've carried forward in kind of my leadership philosophy, is actually inviting someone else to speak up on a topic that maybe they wouldn't necessarily chime in on their own, but something like, oh yeah, Heather and I were actually discussing this concept the other day. She had some good ideas. Like, I think she should talk about them. So, kind of providing that support and that space, I think, is something that's given me a little bit of a voice, and again, something that I really carry with me in my own, leading my own team now.
I wanted to offer a counterexample of an experience I had with just what I guess we would call an ally. I had a CEO who is a male, and he was one of the most important mentors of my career. And I noticed he never advertised it, but over the period of time that we were working together, absolutely noticed that he was extremely cautious in how people had access to him, particularly when we were offsite and not in the office. So at conferences, if he was going out for dinner, he made sure that it wasn't like extended late nights with just other men, et cetera, that like I possibly wouldn't have had access to because it was a little bit less comfortable. And so, and I was I was one of the only females on the leadership team at that organization. So I was always very grateful. What I learned over time was him taking extreme caution and make sure that there was equitable access and opportunity to build relationships, and a significant amount of time spent mentoring. I'm not usually the quietest one in the room, and so I needed some support over the course of my work or my career in learning how to channel energy and conversation.
Yeah, and just to tag on to Alyssa and Heather, you both are good points. Unfortunately, Heather, I'm sure we all have stories of getting told, like, I've been told I have a small stature, so I need to dress differently in a meeting room. We all have stories of something like that. But I think to your point, Alyssa, like, also a good way to be an ally is calling out when those events are happening. So if you are out late with a leadership team, or if you are out on about to go out on golf day and you recognize, like, why aren't there any women here? Or why aren't we doing things where more women are invited to it? And calling that out so that it starts to be recognized and start to change what that dynamic is in the organization and culture.
I love how organically there's just so many sort of ideas out there. One of, sometimes it could just be as simple as just paying attention of your environment, right? It's like, and so one of my managers was, he would always pay attention to detail. So we would go for our one-on-one walks, and he would take a look at my shoes and say, "Can you walk in these shoes?" And just even that is such a value. And so, yeah, I mean, I to the point, all it takes is just being a little bit more aware. All right, I am going to move the conversation forward, and let's talk about innovation and innovation and growth. We're all revenue leaders. Curious to hear, and I'm opening it up to all of you. I'm curious to hear from all of you on examples of how your presence in leadership has positively impacted innovation and growth in your organizations. Who wants to go?
I can chime in with a couple things. So I think one of the biggest things that I've tried to employ in pretty much every organization that I've joined is building cross-functional partnerships. So in customer success, like, we're all about relationship building, both externally and also internally, because we work with pretty much every single department within the company to advocate for the customer and also kind of bring that voice and feedback to the forefront. So for me, one of the things that I kind of really live by is, I need to build really strong internal relationships, because ultimately that is going to play out in the customer experience and how my team functions with their customers. So I don't know that it's particularly innovative or unique, but this is an area in which I've really sought out some siloed teams, such as our engineering team, or even our HR team, or sometimes our sales team is a little bit siloed from the post-sale side of things, and really finding my own, allies and people that I can connect with and listen to, understand what their problems are, what our problems are, and then find common projects and initiatives to kind of move those forward together has been really impactful for me and for my organization.
Leaning in and building relationships and really developing that empathy.
Yep, exactly.
I can kind of add to what Heather said. I think as women, we generally just have, better empathy. I'd like to think so. And I think if we kind of hone in on that and use that to our advantage, we are going to be just much better leaders and coworkers in general. I think having women in the leadership and executive team definitely helps the rest of the whole organization to also follow in that sort of mindset. I think one thing that I could say that I try, at least at Opensense, to do, similar to what you said, Roli, is kind of what Heather said, is to try to bring like consistency, not have teams work in silos. So a lot of times it happens that the sales team has just a lot more males and like very fewer females, perhaps, or maybe engineering could be that way. So to try to see if we can all sort of collaborate and maybe use the same tools, just a small way to achieve kind of consistency. So that's something that helps, and generally kind of like being better leaders as well in our individual teams, using that sort of empathy. So maybe working with, okay, we want to do reviews, or how are we going to build on people's career development? How do we want to do performance cycles, and everyone kind of achieving consistency, but also leading with empathy.
Empathy goes in so many different ways, right? So empathy with, especially for revenue leaders, it's so important to have empathy with your customers. We've got a lot of customer success leaders, really empathy with your customers, and being able to then translate what you're hearing from a customer need back internally to your organization. And both Srishti and Heather both said, sort of, then how do you really drive that across your organizations? Very critical, which is why I believe with the astute sense of empathy that a lot of women naturally have, and not to say men don't, but a lot of women naturally tend to have, is why I believe women can be very successful in revenue roles, right? And revenue leadership roles. If we've got other folks who've got who want to share how you've had an impact in innovation and growth within your company, I'd love to hear. If not, we can move forward. We've got lots of really ground to cover here. Anyone else?
Going to offer that I typically come into organizations that are either in turnaround environments or in a go-to-market where they're trying to do something new or differently. And so we need rapid change, either in growth or turnaround really quickly. And first of all, it's just a really fun place for me to be. I love working like that. It involves a lot of taking apart systems, but in this kind of like dangerous way of like, don't break it too much, just break it at the perfect place at the perfect time in the perfect moment. And what I enjoy about executing those roles is the reliance on super clear communication about why we're doing things, why the change is necessary, and what people's role is. And then supporting, empowering others, because you truly can't do rapid growth or a rapid turnaround environment from in top-down management. And so I typically defer a lot of decision-making, a lot of systems ownerships to people on the team. And I think empathy does matter when things are kind of getting challenged, but what I rely on a lot is clear communication, pulling people together for joint decision-making, but being able to make rapid, fast-paced decisions with a lot of complex input. That's all.
Sounds good. I'm going to actually move us forward a little bit about imposter syndrome. I felt it being, every single role change I've had, I felt the imposter syndrome, and it is something that that is now, lots of research shows women feel the imposter syndrome a lot more. There are two components to it, right? There's a component of what environment are they in, and do they feel like they belong? And a lot of the discussion today has already spotlighted that, with Lizzie sharing her stories about being, feeling like you are in an environment where you belong, and Alyssa sharing some of her stories. I want to sort of talk about the outside of the environment. I want to talk about just advice that if any one of you have felt imposter syndrome, my sense is many of us would have felt imposter syndrome. But more importantly, I'm curious to hear what advice would you share with the audience on how do you handle it when you do feel it?
Yeah,
I'm happy to.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I actually am feeling it right now, and I feel very comfortable where I am currently working. But I took over a sales organization a few months ago, and I've led BD and account management teams, but never a sales organization. So I have lots of moments of like, what is everyone talking about? Or I have literally no idea what that acronym means. And I think, my way of overcoming this is something that I've learned after taking on new things many times and seeing how it ends up going, and then trying to remember how it ends when I'm starting it. So often when you're taking something that exists, there's like a historical way of doing the things that they do. And a lot of those processes or systems are great. But when you don't have the exact same experience, you actually bring something really amazing to the table, because you get to question why things are done the way they are. And I often hear the answer, well, that's just the way we always did it. And then I start to dig in and understand, is there a better way, a more efficient way, a more revenue driving way to do something? And start to kind of like tinker around with some of those things. And what I find is that impact is really refreshing to people on the team. And it opens doors for them to come to you with other things that they'd like to do differently, which ultimately leads to a lot better processes, systems, ways of working. So I think the next time, you find yourself in a place where you have imposter syndrome or you've never done something before, it's really remembering that you always bring your mindset to the table. So for me, I like to understand end-to-end systems and policies and poke holes in those systems and policies. And that can really lead to incredible positive change. So yeah, I just remind myself, like, I have a mindset that I bring everywhere I go, and that's going to help to this team or this organization. And that mindset continues to grow and evolve with each new opportunity that I'm in.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't tell who was speaking there. I've definitely dealt with this. I had a little bit of that this morning when preparing to speak with you all, if I'm being honest. But what sort of works for me, and maybe this will help some of you out there, is just to take kind of a step back and really think about my own accomplishments and create sort of what Lizzie mentioned too, create a quick mental list of what I've done well in the past and remind myself of some of the challenges that I personally have overcome, goals I've achieved, positive feedback I've received, and just kind of like resetting a little bit with some kind speak to yourself. And also just know that everybody, well, not everybody, but just about everyone, even highly successful people, just experience self-doubt too. But those who sort of overcome that have really just become skilled at flipping their mindset and deciding to view challenges as opportunities for development instead, like Lizzie alluded to as well. That's just a conscious decision we can all make. Just acknowledge the difficulty, give yourself a minute, but then turn it around and just face it head on. And I think most importantly, just talk about it. Colleagues, mentors, or friends can offer perspective and reassurance. I mean, just when Lizzie said she had it right now, I took a deep breath, not alone. So I think that's what I would add to that.
Underscoring what both Lizzie and Ashley have said, I tend to think of three things. I fall back on data. So I remember reading at one time that 70% of people, regardless of gender, experience imposter syndrome, and specifically 20 to 30% of high achieving individuals experience imposter syndrome. And so whenever I'm feeling insecure, unsure, or like I'm not the right person for this and it needs to be somebody else, I actually flipped that to a mindset of like being an indicator that I'm on a right path, knowing that this is just part of the recipe of experiencing growth and success, that risk and being unsure and being insecure is just literally part of the recipe of what it takes to go out and do something new, to try something entrepreneurial, and to go on an endeavor. And if I am feeling like that, then I'm emulating what those who've gone before me have done. And it switches my mindset out of like, I'm not the right person, into like, okay, tactically, what's the next step that I need to take to make sure I lock in that outcome.
I love it.
Oh, I was going to add one more thing if it's okay. Something that sometimes helps me is, if I'm feeling like maybe a fear around that, because I do definitely experience imposter syndrome and have over the course of my career, is like just working through my worst case scenarios too. Like, what is the worst thing that could happen in whatever situation I'm afraid of? If it's, they often talk about how women are less likely to apply for jobs if you're not fully qualified on the list of requirements. Like, so what? Like, what's the worst that could happen? You don't get the job? Okay, you're like no worse off than you are right now. So why not just try? And so, working through some of the worst case scenario fears, thinking about like, what would you do if the worst case scenario came to fruition? And then choosing to believe instead that, okay, that's an unlikely outcome. If it does happen, I know what I'm going to do. And instead I'm going to choose to believe the best thing that's going to happen. And I'm going to move forward with kind of that best case scenario mindset, knowing that I've prepared for anything that could happen in other scenarios.
Oh, sorry, really. One more thing.
I the excitement on this topic. Go ahead, Shrishti.
I think what definitely, as everyone has said, I'm pretty sure everybody faces this at some point in their life, if not like more frequently than you think or would like to admit. But I think it's important to note, like, it's okay to not have all the answers. No one really has all the answers. It's more important to kind of think of what questions you can actually ask, because the answers are out there, whether it's in data, having help from your teammates, your peers, your leaders, or whoever else. The answers are there and you can get them. It's more important to kind of think of like all the questions you can possibly ask about a situation, because then you'll feel more confident after that. You just have to sort of do your best and let like the work, the outcomes sort of speak for themselves. I think as a leader, like in a team, there's oftentimes you'll come, there'll be initiatives you want to take that you don't know how to do them. But it's important to kind of leverage the skill set of who you have around you and your support system as well, and sort of gain from their knowledge and skills to get to where you want to be. The cool thing also I tell myself is everybody here on my team and at this company, they also want me to succeed. So my success is their success, is our customers' success, So everyone wants you to succeed. Take the help. It's fine. Take it.
I love it. I love it. This is a topic I can spend a lot of time talking about. I've felt imposter syndrome every single time I've had a role change, and most recently when I stepped into the CEO role. And so my first time CEO role, so felt the imposter syndrome. And there are a couple of things. One, it is to make sure I think it was Heather who said that, what is the worst that's going to happen? Right? To go for it. What is the worst that's going to happen? Two, tactically, I actually have a Post-it note that I stick it up at my desk, which basically says, I belong. I'm here because people have done the vetting and I belong. And I think it's a good way to kind of reinforce confidence in yourself. And then the third thing is, to Shrishti's point, you don't need to have all the answers yourself. As a leader, your job is to be asking the right questions, being curious, being able to understand where the opportunity could be, and then really enlist your teams, your support networks to really help you help you be successful. So I think once you start believing in the fact that you're here because you belong, and there's a whole community working towards making you successful, it just gives you a sense of strength. But yeah, everyone feels it. Everyone feels imposter syndrome, and that means it's a good thing. You're actually pushing yourself and into uncomfortable zone, and that's when growth happens the most. Okay, I know we are nearly coming to the end of it. I have a couple of additional questions. And so one of them is around some of our audiences, I'm sure, are wanting to better understand the essential skills and qualities that are crucial for women who are aspiring for roles in revenue leadership roles. When you, and I'll open it up to everyone in the panel, when you think about revenue leadership, what are some of the skills that you would recommend are important to build on for folks who are earlier in their career?
I can kick us off here just with a few thoughts. So I think as maybe you have picked up throughout this conversation, I have a few kind of mottos or things I like to live by that just kind of help guide the decisions that I make. One of those things that I think is a particularly important skill is consistency and follow up and follow through. So being in a leadership role starts before you're ever given that title. One of my leaders told me one time, in order to be promoted, you already have to be doing the job long before you get that title. And so that's really stuck with me. And I think a really important skill set is really being able to understand that consistency and how you show up to every single one of your coworkers, those above you, those below you, those around you, is perhaps one of the most important things that I have learned and that has served me well. Is always, no one ever is surprised by the reaction they're going to get from you, or the response, or what version of you they're going to get from one day to the next. So I think that would be the most important piece of advice or skill that I could say for anyone that would like to step into a leadership role.
I have one that someone already mentioned, but I think building out your cross-functional relationships is a really important thing to do. As you move up in an organization, you work with more and more teams. So having foundational relationships not only helps you do your day-to-day job, but also more people know what you're doing and know what the impact is that you have, and it will pay dividends once you're in that leadership role and need the support from those cross-functional teams.
Yeah, I like to say it's leadership, leverage, and results. Nothing beats the fact that you are in a role. If you're in a revenue role, you have to nail it. You have to nail your craft. You have to nail your results. Two, relationships matter. It doesn't matter. You have as you move into leadership roles, having the ability to create relationships and build relationships and nurture those relationships inside the company and key stakeholders, but even outside the company, are so critical, right? And then being really, and I think, Lizzie, you had mentioned earlier in the conversation, having that business acumen is so important as you are becoming a revenue leader. It's important to go hit your goals and targets for your team, but it's also important to see how does that really tie back to the company priorities. And it's a skill that you almost need to kind of build and remind yourself on a regular basis. What are you doing, and how is your team contributing to the company goals? And how can you really create leverage? So to me, those are sort of the big critical element. And then curiosity. Just be curious to see what else is happening. Talking about business acumen, one of the most important things as I'm seeing happen that differentiate between good and great revenue leaders are ones who actually focus on data and metrics. I'm curious to hear from all of you, what are some of the metrics and KPIs that you all lean into as revenue leaders?
Yeah, I think, there are a number of different metrics that we look at in KPIs that are vital for measuring success. I think that right now, what I'm most focused on in my particular role is learning more about revenue growth. I've taken on the sort of account management function as well as the CS side of things, and trying to align those two teams and create synergy when ultimately we all have the same goal, is that, retention and growth. So there's that. And then also obviously churn rate, a high churn rate erodes the revenue gains, making it, essential for us to monitor and address what's contributing to churn and looking at that closely. So that's something where you need to utilize other metrics to understand why your churn rate is the way it is, like, CSAT and NPS rate. So the list goes on, but those are the ones I focus on the most lately, which is revenue growth, retention, and churn rate.
Wonderful. For some reason, I can't see everyone's faces, but speak up if you have metrics that you track too.
Yeah, I think something that I'm really focused on right now is CAC and lifetime value of each of the individual channels, to really start to understand, like, what is driving the most value, where should we lean in and put more budget or more effort behind, and what do we need to build out to continue to grow there. Something else that I think is an interesting thing to view for more around, like, how good is the leader, is the performance of the lowest performing member of the team. So I think it's, like, really easy to have superstars on your team, but how are leaders coaching their teams and managing someone and helping them get up to the level that they need to be, because that's a harder part of the job than managing the superstars.
Yeah, and I think another thing at the end of the day, like, it all comes down to the bottom line. So how are we contributing, weaving, your department, your team, to the bottom line of the organization? One thing we've done is we've actually had all of our CSMs and onboarders take kind of like a business 101 course that we facilitated around, like, what even is ROI? How do companies make money? And, how do we specifically make money? And how does what we do in our day-to-day translate to that bottom line, so that no matter who we're talking to within the organization, we can speak intelligently with the language that matters to them. And, that those in the financial making decisions really look at us as experts on that piece of it from the customer side. So I think it all comes back to the bottom line, and every KPI or initiative that we set forth has to have some sort of tie-in back to that.
Yeah. There are two types of metrics, right? There are metrics that are business metrics, like Heather and Lizzie talked about, which is sort of how does this tie back? And to me, especially in this economy, if you're a revenue leader, and we have a lot of customer success leaders on the panel here, really retaining, expanding your existing customer base is so critical for growth, right? I think that is sort of your retention metrics, your churn metrics, your upsell metrics are all critical. And then leading indicator metrics that drive to it. Like if there is usage of your product, your NPS metrics, your CSAT, like all of those are leading indicators to where your growth could potentially land. And then sort of it also then to Lizzie's point, it's when you are, for a new business, when you're acquiring new customers, what channels are really driving the best ROI. So those are some of the metrics that I look at a CEO level, which is, what is your lifetime value of a customer? What is your cost of customer acquisition? How do you really drive higher productive channels and drive more ROI from every dollar spent? Becomes really, really important. Okay, so I'm getting a nudge that we are ready to start wrapping up. Before we wrap up, I want to open up the floor for some questions from the audience. Let's look at some of the questions that we have coming in. Okay, so excellent question. The question is, as a leader, how do you tread line between empathetic, nurturing, supporting, while also being respected as a leader and making some tough business decisions? Who wants to take that?
I can.
I love. I was just going to say, I love that question. I think about that all the time. I think the best way that I've been able to do this is actually work on the front end to set expectations with your team and those around you really clearly, so that when it comes time to make difficult decisions and to hold people accountable, you have done the work to set the expectation. People know exactly what they need to be doing, and you've had the conversations, the hard conversations ahead of time, so that when you may have to, make a decision that is not super awesome, you can fall back on the accountability piece that you've already displayed, and kind of going back to that consistency.
Setting the right expectations up front. Did I hear someone else also wanting to answer this question?
Heather pretty much said it, essentially what I was going to say. So, but she said it so well. Doesn't need to be said again.
All right. So the next audience question, which is also a really interesting one, which is, can you share specific instances where mentorship or sponsorship played a pivotal role in your career growth? And how can aspiring women revenue leaders seek out such opportunities? And why is mentorship so important?
I had a situation in a previous role where my role that I was originally in was part of a reduction in force, which was really, really frustrating because it wasn't, anything that I did or could have done or could have controlled. And it didn't really have to do with my individual performance. And that was a case where my manager's support at the time, as well as other advocates I had built within the organization, became really pivotal, because they were able to go to bat and say, listen, I know we don't need that role anymore. There's not a business need for that particular role at the company. We understand, but we need Laura. And where else can we find a spot for Laura? And, find another opportunity for me to take on. And it was something totally different than I was doing. It wasn't necessarily where I expected my career to go, but it definitely gave me exposure to some new things, was a chance to learn and grow. And really, they came through for me because they were advocates for me and had gotten to know me and my work. And that was, a unique moment where someone's sponsorship really mattered.
I think we talked a little bit about this before, but it really helped me in the past of overcoming imposter syndrome. So I started my career in account management roles, and then had a female mentor who said I should take her previous position. She was getting a promotion in business development. And I was like, I am not a salesperson. I cannot be a salesperson. She was like, yes, you can. You already do it. Here are the 10 ways that you're already a seller, and you can transition it into this other role that we have an opportunity for you. And I've been in business development roles ever since then. And she's continued to be a mentor for me. So I think, mentorship and sponsorship has helped me just believe in myself, because the other person is believing in me as well.
What you'll also find, and I found, I'm sure you all would probably relate to it, mentoring and sponsorship can happen from anyone. It doesn't need to be really your manager or senior leader in the company. It could be a friend. It could be a significant other. It could be anyone where you can actually lean in and get that. And one of the things that I learned earlier in my career was to really build that personal board of directors, and to really build that group of people who are just advocates of you, right? Advocate if you in different stages of your life and career. And when you have that, you have they help you with, they help you give you confidence, help you with imposter syndrome. They help you reach out and get ready for the next big opportunity. So, okay, so we are at time. So I'm going to bring it home and thank everyone for joining us. I want to first extend my heartfelt gratitude to a fantastic panelists that have generously shared their time, their insights, and their experiences. I also want to thank all of you in the audience who've stayed with us throughout the session. I hope these conversations have sparked something for you all today that is not just confined in these virtual walls. And I ask you all today that we carry the spirit of Women's Equality Day with us. And so let's keep the conversation that started here alive. Let's champion diversity and bring the change that we want to see. So with that, thank you everyone, and we will wrap this session.